All right, thanks everybody for joining me. Excuse me, I gotta pour myself a drink here real quick. But go ahead and get your questions posted on there. Or somebody rings the doorbell. Right? All right. So we're off to a good start. Hazel. Excuse me for a second. All right. Sorry about that, folks. It's just my my bug sprayer guy. He likes to knock on the door whenever he shows up. So sorry about the interruption there. So like I said, we'll go ahead and get started here. If you got your questions, go ahead and post them. It's going to be below the video if you're on a mobile device, a smaller screen like that. If you're on a laptop, desktop computer, something like that, it's going to be to the right of the video. So I always start with questions that were asked up to an hour before. So Daniel S. will be who I'm starting with. So if you happen to post your question before what would be 2 p.m. Eastern time, no worries. Just copy and paste your question if you're in there. The reason why I do that is I just try to answer questions for people who I believe are here waiting to see their question get answered. So like I said, I'll be starting here with Daniel S. So Daniel S. says, I'm a little confused on how much little your lead hip should shift toward the target in the downswing thoughts. It can vary, but there is going to be some shifting of the lead hip. So basically, most tour players are going to see a shifting anywhere from 3 to 6 inches, probably somewhere in that area. So yeah, there is going to be a lateral shift there. The key that I see that where most people have the biggest issue is the moving of the hip away from the target as they go up to the top. So as they go up to the top of the swing, they actually slide their hips that way. And when you slide the hips that way, it's just too much ground to make up. And also your leg is at an angle that makes it very, very difficult to get leverage to push to the lead side. So if you imagine if I shift my weight and I don't move my hip away from the target and I keep it pretty solid here, as I go up to the top, now, one, I don't have to move that far, right? I'm going to move a little bit to get to my lead side. And two, I have leverage. My leg is angled in here to where I can actually push toward my lead side. Whereas if I slide my hips that way, now I have a long way to go to my lead side, and I don't really have the leverage to be able to do it because my leg is straight up and down. So that's really the key. That's where I see most students get in trouble, is that they really, they know that, hey, I got to load up in the backswing. What they do, instead of shift, when we say load up in the backswing, we're talking about shifting pressure into your lead foot, not shifting mass, right? Not shifting mass, meaning we're not moving our whole body away from the target. We're shifting pressure. We're putting more pressure. As we start and move in our backswing, we want to be putting pressure into the ground and rotating the hips back like this. We don't want to be sliding our hips this way and getting up like that. That's where you're going to get in trouble and make it difficult. But typically, as you get up to this good position, there's going to be about 3 to 6 inches. Not all tour players really shift a lot. If you look at Cameron Champ, right? If you look at Cameron Champ, typically the more flexible you are, the less you have to kind of laterally. That's what I've noticed for the most part. If you look at players that don't have a big lateral shift, most of them are on the kind of lanky, more flexible type. So like a Bubba Watson, a Cameron Champ, Joaquin Neiman, these kinds of guys, extremely like Gumby-like flexibility. Dustin Johnson is another one. Very, very flexible golfers. They don't have a lot of lateral shift, but the golfers that have more lateral shift are going to be golfers like Brooks Koepka. You see Adam Scott's got a fair amount of lateral shift. So basically, they're going up to the top, and not that they're not flexible. I know Adam Scott is pretty flexible, and he's got some lateral shift. So it doesn't necessarily apply, but typically when you see guys that don't have a lot of lateral shift, it's from I noticed that they're typically very, very flexible. All right, so let me just a second here. There we go. So hopefully that's better. So so yeah, you'll see with some of those players like Bubba Watson is that they get here and then they don't really move laterally much at all. They get to their leads as soon as they get to their lead side. They're kind of squatting down. They're getting to their lead side, and then they're starting to open up like that. You'll see that in a lot of players, but you'll also see like in Adam Scott where they're here. There's some movement. There's some lateral movement, like 3 to 6 inches to the lead side as they're rotating open. So it's 3 to 6 inches is on average is what I would say I would typically see. Sorry about that. So sorry, just my phone's ringing, just everything at 3 o'clock. You know, it's been dead all day. Nobody really has been here at all. And then 3 o'clock hits right when office hours starts, and I got somebody knocking on my door. I got my phone ringing, all kinds of stuff. So sorry for the interruptions, guys. So John L says, "Hi Q. In the move, we turn the handle to close the face. Is it possible to need different amounts of shaft turn in for different clubs from a wedge to a driver?" No, not unless you use like an extremely different grip for a wedge shot versus a driver. I mean, if you use so for example, let's say you used a very weak grip for your wedge for some reason, right? So if I were to come into contact with a certain amount of forward shaft lean, I would need to bow my wrist a certain amount to get that club face squared up, right? And then for some reason, if you decide, well, I'm going to use a really strong grip with my driver. So now if I went with my driver here and I had an extremely strong grip, like crazy strong grip, right? In that case, I wouldn't really need to turn the handle down very much at all to get that face squared up. So it really, really just depends on your grips. But if you use the same grips, it's going to be, you need to use the same amount to square up the face. So I think this is an important concept to understand is what affects the direction this club face is pointing, right? So the face angle at impact. And I've explained this several times in office hours. So if you've seen it many times before, if you're a frequenter, I do apologize for the repetitiveness, but I think it's a really, really important. Even if you have seen it before, I think it's good to see it a few more times. So there's basically 3 things that square up the face, or 3 things that affect the direction the club face is pointing. So I got my angle finder on here so you can kind of see easily where the club face is pointing. So number 1 is the release of the club, right? So if I release the club earlier, right? So that's an early release of the club, meaning the club is overtaking my hand sooner in the swing. That is a means to close the face, right? So if I'm going to have the club straight up and down like this, right? So straight up and down, and I'm going to move the handle toward the camera here, which would indicate an early release. If I do that, that closes the face, right? Now, if I have a later release, meaning I'm releasing the club more out in front, that's going to open the face. So again, if I have the shaft straight up and down, if you're looking from that angle, and I push the handle forward, you can see that opens the face. So more forward shaft lean means you're going to have to do other things to get that face closed because that opens the face. Less forward shaft lean and earlier release of the club means there's less things that you have to do to get that face closed. In fact, you may need to do other things to get the face open, which we'll talk about here in a second. So that's number 1. The release of the club controls the face angle a little bit at impact, or quite a bit. The next piece is the twisting of the handle. So that's how the handle goes like this, right? So that can be from my forearms going like this, and that can be from my wrist angles, right? So arm rotation, forearm rotation, as well as internal, external rotation of my arms and my shoulders. And then we have flexion extension of the wrist. So if I just roll over my arms here, you can see that opens and closes the face. And you can see here, if I put my wrist flexion extension and go back and forth, you can see that opens and closes the face. So that's what we're talking about in the move, is we're talking about doing that as we're starting down to help get that face closed. If that face is closed, then I can get the hands more in front at impact and have the face square. That's essentially squares the face up when we get forward shaftling. All right. And then the last piece is the lowering and raising of the handle. So if I have this club square and I have it the sole of the club flush to the ground there, if I raise the handle, that opens the face. If I lower the handle, it closes the face. So those are the three things. Now, your typical amateur student or amateur player, a lot of students that I get, I would say 80% of 75 to 80% of the students that I get square the club face in this way. They have a combination of an early release, right, which closes the face. They have a high handle, which opens the face, and they do some amount of rolling over of the arms to close the face. So all that for them typically adds up to a squaring of the face. Now you can hit functional golf shots, right? You can hit a straight golf shot by having an early release, having the arms rolling over and a high handle. You can have a straight shot with that, but it's just not going to be the most efficient way to hit the golf ball because you're releasing the club early, right? You're adding loft to the face. Whereas you see a lot how tour players square up the face is they have a later release, right? So a later release that opens the face. They turn the handle down a little bit to close the face. And then they have a lower handle as well as they come through contact to close the face. You add all that together and you get a square club face, but you get a more efficient strike because you're de-lofting the club. You're transferring more energy to the golf ball. So that's really what it comes down to. So whether you have a weak or strong grip or whatever club it is, you're just turning that handle, right, in the move to get that face squared up when you get forward shaftling, right? When you have the hands, when you have a later release is basically what it is. Because that can be a little bit confusing too, because with a driver, there usually isn't much forward shaftling. The club usually is going to be pretty much straight up and down or with a very slight amount of forward shaftling. But the club is still releasing later. I'm talking about when the release is happening. The reason why there isn't a lot of forward shaftling with a driver is because of ball placement. Ball placement with an iron is going to be about right there. With a driver, it's going to be more forward, right? So the club is releasing a little bit more by the time it gets to the ball, but it's still the full release is still happening out here. The same with either club. All right. So hopefully that makes sense. And you're not going to basically you need to turn the handle down enough to get the face square when you have the hands forward. The more you have the hands more forward of the golf ball, the more you need to turn that handle down to square it up. Or the later release you have, the more you have to turn that handle down. All right, so let's keep moving through here. So John K says, I have the 4, 5, and 6 iron, which are rescue clubs, and I have trouble getting them up in the air. Help. Thank you. It'd be hard to say without seeing your swing, but you may need more loft on them. More speed's going to help you to get those up in the air. So it's typically if you struggle getting the ball up in the air, it's almost always because you don't have enough speed. So one thing I'd recommend doing is working on the 20-minute distance fix to get you some added club head speed. If you're not familiar with what that course, it's our distance course. Most people are gaining, on average, people are gaining 12 to 13 miles per hour going through that course with their driver. And it goes through the bag. You gain speed with your driver, it goes down through the bag. You're going to gain speed with everything. But that equates to, with the driver, about 34 or so yards. So if you're looking to get the ball up higher, one of the easiest and best ways is to add more speed. So that's really what I would recommend. I mean, that's for anybody. Anybody who wants to hit the ball higher is definitely going to want to do that. It's when it's funny. Clay told me when he was younger, he would watch really, really good players and he would see that they hit the ball really, really high. So he thought in his mind, well, to be a good player, you have to hit the ball really high. Well, at that young age, Clay didn't have a ton of speed. So what he did to try to get the ball go as high as possible is he flipped the club and he added a lot of loft and he had an early release. Well, later on, as he got more speed, he was hitting the ball way too high and then had to figure out how to get forward shaft lean. And that's, getting a later release and doing the move and things like that. So, but if you're someone who struggles to get the ball up in the air, speed is going to be the best thing that you can do. Not only because it's going to help you to get the ball up in the air, it's going to help you to hit the ball further because you're going to hit it higher and further when you do that. So this illustration right here that I have, this is basically the trajectory of a shot. And let's say that this one right here, this trajectory right here is for an 80-mile-per-hour swing. And this trajectory right here is for a 100-mile-per-hour swing. Well, they're launching at the same angle. So the launch angle, meaning where the angle between the starting trajectory of the ball and the horizon there in the ground, they're starting at the same point. But the one that has more speed is climbing higher in the air. You can see that the height is this much higher than that because it's got more energy, right? So if you want to hit the ball higher, the main thing is going to be get more speed. Without seeing your swing, I can tell you I know that will help you quite a bit, and it will help all areas of your game as well. So Rufus I says, I have a problem with the way I see curving the ball is taught. For draw hook, we are instructed to aim the club face at the target, then everything else to the right. Since the direction the club face is aligned determines most of the initial direction of the ball, wouldn't this cause the ball to start at the target, then hook? Shouldn't the club face be open and swing more to the right? So yeah, you're exactly right about that. If where you were at address actually happened at impact, because that's usually not the case. It's usually not the case we're not robots. So it's not like we can just set up, okay, I'm going to turn my feet 2 degrees that way. I'm going to turn my face 1 degree open. And I'm going to hit just a little baby draw. That's not really the way that it works. So for most people, it's better visually to get that club face pointing at the target and get the feet moving out that way and feel how that face is getting close to the path. And usually that works out best for people. But hey, if doing it the way that you're talking about, setting up with the face on basically the starting line, if that works better for you, then great. But typically, if you were to actually deliver the club at impact the way that it is at address, then that's exactly what you would want to do is aim it at the target. But in my teaching and what I've seen people do, that's usually not the case. Typically, when people set up, if someone's trying to hit a draw and they set up with their body closed off a little bit and the face open, what I typically see is they just hit a push out to the right. That's typically what I see. Whereas it's something about having that face closed to the path that helps them understand, okay, I'm going to get this ball to start, or I'm going to get this ball to hook, right? So that's, if you're a robot and you can do that, then that's fine. But if not, typically it's better to have that face a little bit closed for the draw, or a little bit open for the fade. So James T says, are there any guidelines to help me pick the degree of loft for the driver? My current driver is 10.5. Would it help my distance to go to a 9 or a 9.5? It really just depends on your swing and your club head speed and all that stuff. The only way to know what loft actually works best for you, if you want to know for sure, is to get professionally fitted. That's the only way to know. And the shaft makes a difference too. If you can have because it's about the loft that you deliver to the golf ball, right? So you can have a driver with a certain amount of loft, right? And then change the shaft, and you may deliver a very different loft at impact because the shaft changes things. So the only way to know what works best for you, unfortunately, is to get fitted. And I know some people, I don't know why, maybe it's just because they don't want to for some reason, don't want to get fitted and they don't want to go through the process. It's completely fine. But basically you're just going to be guessing and checking if that is the case. And what's cool is a lot of drivers these days are adjustable. So, you can get, I think this driver here, this is my old driver, the old Callaway Epic driver. I think that this can go anywhere from, yeah, I think I can have this anywhere from 8 to 11 degrees. I think there's about a 3-degree variance there. So, you can kind of set it up to see what I actually have this set up. I think I have it set up at 8 degrees. Yeah, so I hit up on the ball quite a bit because that's when you hit up on the ball, you typically deliver a little bit more loft. So I hit up on the ball anywhere from 3 to 5 degrees with my driver. So I deliver a higher loft than someone who would hit down on the ball over very level. So that's why a lower lofted driver works better for me. And yeah, so that's basically what, it really just depends on your swing. So like I said, you just have to get professionally fitted if you want to know for sure, or you can kind of just like trial and error with the driver that you have to see what works best for you. All right, so keep the questions coming here, and we'll keep answering them. So Andy C says, I really extend, and I think that's why I can't get forward shaffling because I move my body further away from the ball. So I release my lag early, cast, just to get the club face to the ball. Does that make sense? We have to keep down over the ball in order to get forward shaffling. Yes. So if your upper body, if you're early extending, for those of you who are familiar with what early extension is basically when the hips move toward the golf ball, or basically where the hips extend too early in the swing, right? That's basically what it is. But a good way to see if you are early extending or not is to draw a line. So if you got a good camera angle, get the camera going down your toe line here, and I'll line up my backside with this vent, with the edge of the vent here. So as I go up to the top of the swing, I want to see my hip keeping contact, or if I were to draw a line on my backside, there would be the edge of the vent. I want my hip to stay in contact with that. If my hip were to go like this, right, you can see I'm moving away from the edge of the vent. That's early extension. So and extension is this, right? So when you can see that the angle between my spine and my legs, when that straightens out, that angle increases and goes to 180, right? So this would now be a straight line, 180-degree angle. That's extension. So it's called early extension because we want extension in the swing. We just want it at the right time. Typically, people do it too early. So if I go in the backswing and my hips are moving toward the ball, moving away from the vent here, away from the line that you draw, I'm losing that angle. I'm going like this, right? So that happens to some people in the backswing. Most of the time, people are good there. Most of the time, people are pretty good there. It's in the downswing where we really see that. And typically, if you see people have the early extension in the backswing, they early extend more in the downswing. So that would look something like this, where they go up to the top like this, and then they start down and they come down like that. So what we want to do is we want to push back there, and then we actually want to do, if you probably heard the Sneed squat kind of move, or the tiger squat, we want to actually get some reflex in the legs, right? So we actually kind of want to get more, the opposite of extension would be flexion. We want to get more flexion in the legs here. So you can see I've tightened, I've made that angle between my legs and my spine. I've made that smaller. I've made that angle. I've gone from there to there, right? So I've made that angle smaller. And then from there, as I'm coming in, that's when I extend. As I'm continuing to rotate, that's when I lose that angle. So to show it from this angle, I think this is a better angle to see. I come down, I get that kind of squat coming down. And then from here, this is where you see, that's when I extend. But you're typically never going to see my hip leave that line as I'm coming all the way through. Now, why would that be happening? There's lots of reasons why that would happen. We have 2 sections on the website that are, I think, are going to really, really help you to get rid of your early extension. So one is going to be, it's actually called stop early extension. So there's some things that happen in the setup. Like if you're set up like this with a lot of flex in your legs already at address, you got your chest way on top of the ball already at address. Typically in the backswing, you're gonna extend your legs, right? So there's a video in there about that. There's a video about maintaining side bend. Typically, when you go up to the top, you have left side bend here for right-handed golfer, and then when you come into impact, you have right side bend when you're coming into contact. People who early extend don't really get that side bend. They go up, they don't get that side bend here, and then in the downswing, because they're throwing the club away from them, right? They don't really get the side bend here either, right? Because they're not getting like this. They're not getting the body open. The chest and the hips are together, lined up with each other at impact. So you're not getting that side bend. So there's some video in there about that. So that would be a good series for you. Another series that maybe a lot of people may not realize has a lot to do with early extension is the move. So when you come down steep in transition, what that would mean is when I'm coming down, I have this club in a steep kind of angle. When that happens, I'm going to have to stand up to get that club back on plane, right? So because I want to hit a good golf shot, that's what most people are going to do. They're going to get here, and then they're going to go like this, and there's my early extension. I'm going to throw the club. So what we have to do is we got to get this club shallowed out as we're starting down, so that way I'm incentivized to rotate my body and to also stay in my posture because the club's on plane. I'm going to be able to stay in my posture and rotate because the club's more behind me. If the club's here, or I have the club steep and it's out here, if I were to rotate my body with that, I'd swing way over the top. So if I have the club more behind me and I rotate my body, now you can see that club's coming down right in the slot. So that's what the move is. The club, getting the club shallowed out, getting that club face square earlier, so that way you can rotate and stay in your posture. So the move would be that as well. So if you look at your swing and you see that you're steep, right? You're seeing this butt into the club, pointing inside of the golf ball, seeing this club to be in a more vertical position as you're coming down, I'd recommend the move course. If you're seeing this club's actually shallowed out and you saw that the address position issue, or you saw any of those things, really those two courses are going to help you. So to get to those courses, click the house icon. That'll take you to the home page. Scroll down the home page. You'll see a list of all the courses there. Select the course or courses that apply to you. All right, so let's keep it moving here. John B says, do you have an opinion on whether to use a heavier or a lighter putter on extremely fast greens? It's really personal preference. It's really just personal preference. I don't really have an opinion. I've used heavy putters and I've used lighter putters. Like this one actually right here is a little bit on the heavy side. I have a little bit of trouble sometimes getting this putter started. And then with a putter that's too light, I'll have a tendency to be a little bit too shaky with it. It's too light. I don't have enough feel for the club head. So you want to find a putter that's heavy enough that you can feel the head, you have good feel with it, and it's light enough that you can move it around. And again, that's just personal preference. There's no, whether you play fast or slow greens, it doesn't matter as far as how heavy of a putter you're using. It's more about finding the putter that has, and one thing to keep in mind too is the longer the putter is, the lighter the head can be, because something that's called swing weight. So what swing weight is the balance point of the club, right? So I play a shorter putter. I have kind of longer arms, so I usually play a shorter putter than most people. So because of that, I can use a heavier head because it's not going to feel the same as someone. So let's say I have a 33-inch putter, which I believe this one is a 33-inch putter. So a 33-inch putter with the same weight of head is going to feel heavy, or is going to feel lighter than the same weight of head and a 36-inch putter. It's because that extra length makes this feel heavier, right? So that's what you got to find. You got to find the right putter head weight and shaft length that gives you the enough weight to feel the putter head. Because if you imagine if you were putting with something that was almost weightless, right, it would be hard to control it because you just don't have any feel for it, right? But if you have a little bit of weight there, then you have some feel for it. But if you have too much weight, right, then it's like work getting that thing going and getting started. So you gotta find that happy medium that works for you. And again, that could be trial and error. It could be going to the PGA Superstore with all the hundreds of putters they have around and trying every single one and finding what works for you, or figuring out, looking online. If you don't, the best way would be to get fitted. The best way is to get fitted for a putter. Getting on Sam Putt Lab somewhere where they do fitting. Sam Putt Lab is basically kind of like the TrackMan for putting. I mean, TrackMan has putting too, but the Sam Putt Lab is really, really good for a lot of things with putting. So typically in a good fitting, they're going to use Sam Putt Lab to figure out what's going to be the best equipment for you. If you're looking for a great place to get fitted, and I imagine they may have some deals going on right now, because I'm sure they did during Black Friday. I remember they always did have good Black Friday deals. But basically, it's a company that's called Club Champion. I assume they're still around. I haven't been there in a long time. But the Club Champion is a great place to go. They're located in most major cities all over the U.S. They're located in Orlando. I've been to the one in Chicago. I think there's actually might be two in the Chicago area. But they're located in major cities all over the United States, and they have Sam Putt Lab. I actually got fitted for this putter at Sam Putt Lab, and I really like this putter. I just found that it got a little bit too heavy for me, and that's the other thing to realize too, is that the fitting process, it's not typically something that just happens that one time there, because I figured out over several years what I like the best and what works the best for me. And I found, like, this is a 33-inch putter, just a hair too short for me. And I went a little bit longer with the putter because of things with my stroke that were going on. And I also went a little bit lighter with the head because of lengthening the putter. You need to do that, otherwise it's going to feel too heavy, and it's tough to get started. So that's basically what I did. The fitting process, it takes time to figure out what you really like and know. But it's a good start to go get an initial fitting, and then over time you can kind of tweak things and get things to be where they want, based on what's going on with your game and what you kind of figure out along the way. So, but as far as fast and slow greens, should you use a heavy or light putter? It's really about what putter. It doesn't really matter whether the greens are fast or slow. It's more about what putter gives you the best feel and to allow you to make a good stroke. You need to make a good stroke whether you're playing fast or slow greens. So you need to find the putter head and length of putter and style of putter and all that gives you that proper feel. Now, I'm not affiliated with Club Champion in any way. I've just been there a couple times and always had a great experience, and they use Sam Putt Lab to fit people into putters. So if you're interested, just do a Google search of Club Champion. You should be able to, if they're still around, I assume they're still around, you should be able to find somewhere near you. You may have to drive a little ways, but if not, I'm sure there's places near you that can do that as well. So Gene Christoph M says, I'm working on the stable fluid spine at the moment. Should finish the level. Should I finish the 3 levels or moved to the power turn level 1, etc.? That's really completely up to you. I've seen people go through all the level 1s of each course, and then all the level 2s of each course, and all the level 3s of each course. And then I've seen people go through it and do stable fluid spine, level 1, level 2, level 3. And then power turn, level 1, level 2, level 3. Then lag, level 1, level 2, level 3. So it's really completely up to you. You can do it either way. Whatever you want to do, it's going to be fine. It's not going to hurt you to go from the level 1 of the stable fluid spine straight to the power turn, and then level 1 of the lag. You can do it in any way. It's fine, but I would stick to 1 and stay in 1, get through the level, and then go on to something else or go to the next level. It's completely up to you. There's no right or wrong way to do it. So John S. says, what part of the TS system do you recommend focusing on for players located in cold climate zones over the winter months? You can actually work on all of the pieces of the Top Speed Golf system indoors. You can do the shadow reps. So I would just recommend the one that you need to be working on. And I'd work on them from the start, work on them in order. There's a reason why the stable fluid spine is first, the power turn is second, then the lag, then the compression line, then the straight line release. The reasoning for that is that you can't really do the straight line release, the whole thing, without having a good stable fluid spine. You can't do it. So you want to make sure that, if you go through it and you go level 1s all the way across, or level 2s all the way across, and level 3s, or if you do each section in a row, that's completely fine. You do it that way. But what you want to do is you want to look at your swing on video. Here's what I generally recommend to most students is that they get familiar with what the Top Speed Golf system is, right? So we need to understand, and we can go through that real quickly since we don't have a ton of questions and we got a lot of time. What I'd recommend doing is get familiar with what the Top Speed Golf system is. So I'll do a real crash course of what the Top Speed Golf system is. So number 1 is a stable fluid spine. So what that means is at address, I want to be about 6 to 8 inches or 6 to 8 degrees angled away with my spine. If I draw a line from my belt buckle to my shirt buttons, I want that to be about 6 to 8 degrees angled away. And then at the top of the swing, I want to remain stable and stay pretty centered as I go up to the top. So a good way to check that, what I typically do with students, is I'll draw 2 lines outside their torso. So at address, I like to see those lines outside their torso. I like to see that to be about 6 to 8 degrees angled away. As they go up to the top of the swing, I like to see them stay fairly centered or slightly into the trail line, and their overall body, the overall angle of their body to be the same. So an example of too much slide and not being within, not a stable spine would be going over here like this, or going like this, right? Another example of the spine angle being wrong would be too much spine angle or too much spine angle toward the target. So we want to be nice and angled away at address, that same spine angle nice and centered at the top. And then at impact, we want to come in and we want to be 18 to 25 degrees angled away from the target at impact. So that's a stable fluid spine. The power turn, we want to make sure that we're getting a good shoulder turn, right? So we want to turn our shoulders at least 90 degrees in the backswing. And then in the fall through, we want to come around and get our hips pointing toward the target, and our chest and our shoulders pointing left of the target if you're right-handed. That's basically what the power turn is. If you're not nailing those 2 pieces, I would be sticking it right there, because these are the number 1 keys to playing better golf. The stable fluid spine is what's going to get you a lot of consistency, and the power turn is what's going to get you more speed, which in turn is going to get you more consistent, because the longer you are, the shorter approaches you have, the closer proximity to the hole you have, and the more chances for birdie you have. So the more consistent you're going to be. So and those are the 2 easiest pieces of the Top Speed Golf system. So they're the 2. What's cool is that they're the 2 things that are going to help you the most, and they're the 2 easiest things to improve in your golf swing. If you're nailing the stable fluid spine and you're nailing your power turn, then I'll go on to the lag. I'd much rather you cast the club but have a perfect stable fluid spine and power turn versus have a bad turn and have a ton of lag in the swing. The power turn is going to help you a lot more than having a ton of lag in the swing. So those are the 2 main pieces there. And then lag is where we talk about getting this club to lag behind you at the start of the swing, right? We don't want to be going like this at the top of the swing. We want to be getting this club to start to lag behind us as we're starting down. So that's going to be in the Top Speed lag course where you work on that. Next, the 4th piece is the compression line. So the compression line is the line that goes from our lead ankle, lead hip, and lead shoulder at impact. We want that to be all in a straight line there. We want that to be very slightly angled away from the target at impact. For a driver, it can be a little bit more angled away to promote, because the ground's not in the way, to promote a more upward angle of attack, but we want to be pretty much straight up and down there. So that's, or very, very slightly angled away. That's our compression line. If we are An example of a bad compression line would be where our hips are dead square at impact and the hips are really, really bumped forward, right? So I see this a lot, and that would be an indication of a poor, we need to get the body opening up. We need that to be on a nice straight line there, slightly angled away. The last piece of is the straight line release. So that's where the club overtakes the hands. So you see, I'm going to choke up on this club so you can kind of see where the club is behind my hands, behind my hands, behind my hands. And you can see how the club's working it right there. It's right in front of my hands, and now it's overtaking my hands. So that would be the release would be right there in this instance. And that's really where we want it. We want it to be about 45 degrees out in front. What I see most of the time with amateur players is that release is happening, 20 degrees, 10 degrees out in front. So it's a little bit of an earlier release. We're adding loft. We're hitting some weaker shots. But I'd much rather you have a good stable fluid spine and a good power turn and have a bad release than have a perfect release but no power or no and very, very inconsistent because your stable fluid spine is bad. I don't typically see that. Typically, if your stable fluid spine is bad, you will not have a good release. But every now and then that happens. But that player is usually very, very inconsistent because their spine's moving around everywhere. It's not stable and so on and so forth. So you can do that all inside. So I'd be looking at where is your stable fluid spine good? If it's all exactly what we talk about in the stable fluid spine course, then go to the power turn and work on the power turn. If that's good, that's exactly where it needs to be, then go to the next piece. Don't make the mistake that I see so many golfers make that come as a membership here, is that they look at their swing and the most egregious thing that they see is the early release. It's the most obvious thing to them because it's one of the easiest things to see is the early release. And what they do is they go straight to the early release or the straight line release course and they start working on it. And they get frustrated because they can't improve it. Well, there's a few reasons for that. The one reason is because the other pieces aren't in place, and you're just going to be fighting those pieces to get the straight line release. The other reason is that it's the most difficult one to improve. I talked about the low hanging fruit with the stable fluid spine and the power turn. Those two are the easiest pieces to improve of the top speed golf system. The easiest by far. It's not even close. The straight line release is the most difficult. So get that low hanging fruit. Get that stable fluid spine to be perfect. Get that power turn to be perfect. Make sure your lag is good. Make sure your leg compression line is good, and then move to the straight line release. Don't make this mistake of going to the straight line release right away because you're just going to spin your tires. You're going to spin your wheels if your other pieces aren't in order. Now, if you look at your swing and you've got great spine angles, your power turn is really good, you're getting a lot of lag in the start of the downswing, you're even opening everything up, and your compression line is great, but your straight line release is terrible, that's completely fine. Work on that straight line release at that point, but make sure that the other pieces are good. That's why I recommend kind of going through it and walking and watching all the videos. So that way you get familiar with what it is. So William S. says, I moved toward the target quite a bit on the downswing, 6 inches or so. Can you suggest a drill to stop moving forward so I can get more consistent? So it might be fine to move 6 inches or so. It really depends on what your swing looks like, but I would look first to see if you're moving your hips away from the target as you are going in the backswing. If you're seeing that, that's what I would work on first. One thing you can do to work on that would be just like grab a chair, and I would do this first without a club and just the arms across the shoulders. Now get in your setup here, put the arms across the shoulders and work on kind of loading up and not sliding your hips. You put this chair here so that way you're getting feedback if you're sliding your hips. I put that chair there and I put it to where you're barely touching it, right? You're just barely touching it. And that way, if you turn and you start to touch it a lot, okay, well, I'm sliding my hips. Now I get to where you're just barely touching it. And then I would turn, right? I would make sure that you're loading up. A big mistake people make with this is in order not to hit the chair, they'll go like this, right? They're reverse weight shifting. I want you to be shifting pressure into your trail foot, but I want you to be turning your body back and out of the way. It's almost like if I had rope attached to my belt loop here, and it was wrapped around my hip, and someone was standing over by that door, and maybe my dog had it in her mouth and she was pulling on it. That's what I would want to feel, like my hips getting pulled back a little bit. So that's what you want to feel when you're doing that. Now, once you start feeling better with that, then I would try to do it with some practice swings with the club, right? Try to do the same thing with some practice swings with the club. Then I would add the golf ball and try to do it with the golf ball. So that's what I'd look at first. The other thing would be your compression line. So you kind of do the same thing with this way. So let's say you're loading up properly, but you're sliding your hips forward in the downswing, right? Well, that means that you're not rotating, right? Because if you're rotating, it's really, really hard to slide your hips forward and rotate. So if you're sliding your hips forward, that means that you're not rotating. If you're sliding that much from a good position, that means that you're now. Some tour players you may be fine doing that, but I imagine that I'm guessing you're not opening up your hips. It would be my guess. So I would look at the compression line course and working through the compression line course. There's a drill in there that's very similar to the chair drill. It's just the other side, making sure that you're in the right position. So you do this side because you may be moving your hips to where you need to, but they may be moving a long way because you're moving your hips away from the target. And then if you're not doing that, then I would look at your compression line and work through the compression line course. So to get to the compression line course, select the instruction tab at the top of the screen there, click the Top Speed Golf System, then click the compression line and work through the drills. So Brian G says, I live in Michigan and have a net set up in my basement. Does the SC300 work when hitting into a net indoors? I believe that it does. I don't have an SC300, but I believe that it does. I have an SC200, and I believe you would have to look at the directions, but I believe it says it needs like 7 feet or 10 feet from where the ball is hit to the net. So as long as you have space to have enough, 7 feet or so, I think is what it. Don't hold me to that, but I think it's 7 feet. And what you can do is you can search do a Google search for SC300 manual. And it should say what it is in there, but I believe for the 200, I'm pretty sure it was 7 feet. I don't know what it is for the 300. I would guess that it's the same. But yeah, as long as you have enough space between the ball and the net, because it's just tracking that first several feet, then it should work fine. But I would Google search the manual because it said it in the SC200 manual, so I imagine it would say it in the SC300 as well. So Jim M says, hi Q, where do you hit the ball when you put it? Okay, let me read this again. So hi Q, where do you hit the ball when you put? Is it low or in the middle of the ball? Where do you hit the ball when you put? Sorry, Jim, I don't know what you're trying to ask. Can you mind re-asking your question? I'm not sure what you're trying to ask. So Carol N says, yes, Club Champion is still around. Good. I think they're a great company. So yeah. So Brian P says, hi Q, can GoPro MP4 videos be submitted for swing reviews, or do they have to be from V1? Hate looking at V1 on my phone, but think it's time for some reviews. They need to be submitted through V1. Now, there is an import feature on the V1 app that you can use. So if you go to capture and then you go to import from the capture screen, you can import a video from there. But there can be some issues with that because depending on the file that you're importing in, well, because first of all, you'd have to get that file on your phone, which I don't have a GoPro. Maybe you can easily do that. I'm not sure. But the other thing about a GoPro is I wouldn't recommend that for swing videos because usually I think GoPro is kind of like a fisheye kind of thing. And that's probably not going to work very well for swing reviews. If you're sending me fisheye lens videos, I would be asking you to not do that because it's going to skew things. It's going to make things not look the way that they actually are. So and I don't know, like I said, I don't have a GoPro. Maybe you can change that in the settings. But yeah, fisheye type, panoramic type of view is not good for videoing your swing. You just want kind of like a standard camera type thing. But if the GoPro can do that, and you can get the GoPro video on your phone, so that way you can import it into the V1 app, I would just make sure that when you import it into the V1 app that you trim it to as small a video as possible. So that way, basically, you trim it to where the start of the video is right when the club starts going back, and the end of the video is right when you reach your full finish. You want to keep it as small as possible, because those imported videos, the file size gets really, really large, and it may be, you may not even be able to send it if it's that. Really, the easiest thing to do is to, I mean, you can look at your own swing on your GoPro, but the swings that you would send to your instructor, such as myself, would be, I would just, the easiest thing to do is just to film those with the app. It's really the easiest way to do it. The easiest way to do it is just to set it up, video it with the app, and then send it with the app. Because if you import it, you got to trim it, you got to, and it may not even work if you do that. It can be kind of it's extra steps that really just aren't necessary. So you can do that through a GoPro, but the videos have to be sent through V1. And the reason for that, just going that, we'll move on. But the reason for that is that us instructors, we have to have all the videos coming in from one place to one place. Because if I let a student send me videos through email, then another one through Facebook, then another one through Instagram, and another app or another app, I'm gonna miss a lot of videos, right? So if we have them all in one place, then we can have it all organized. And really, the V1 app is the best thing for that. The other thing about V1 is that the uploading and the downloading of videos is very quick compared to other ones. There's another app, it's called Huddle Technique, which I really like the functionality of the app, but the upload and download, it can take me 15 minutes to download and upload a video. So if it takes me 15 minutes to upload and download a video, then that's 30 minutes, and that doesn't even count the swing review that I would do for you. So if I had to spend an hour, or so, an hour doing one swing review a day, I wouldn't be able to make a living at it, unfortunately. Or I'd have to charge like I would have to charge $2,000 for unlimited swing reviews, or I'd have to charge $200 for just one, right? So all that you have to consider all that when we're choosing the way that we do that. I know some people don't care for V1. I don't have any issue with it. It's not perfect, but it works. I think it works very well. But yeah, hopefully that makes sense. All right, so James G says, Q, what are your thoughts on placing the driver 1 foot behind the ball, like Mo Norman? Hey, if it works for you, then nothing wrong with it. I don't have any issue with it. For me, it's a little bit harder I place the club right behind the ball, and most people do. And that's what works better for me. But hey, if you set up a foot behind the golf ball and you hit the golf ball way better doing that, who am I to tell you that's wrong, right? So yeah, it's completely fine. Justin V says, what's the best video analysis app to view my own swing? I would say Huddle Technique, but Huddle Technique, I think, has changed things in the last year to where I think you have to be a coach to use it. I could be wrong unless you're grandfathered in. I haven't used Huddle in a long time because ever since we started using V1, I've only used that. So I've only really used V1. So that's, based on what I know, I would say V1. But I've heard there's one that's called Swing Vision. I've never used it, but I've heard it's very good. I think it's called Swing Vision. I could be wrong, or Swing Profile. I can't remember exactly what it's called, but I've heard that one's very good. But yeah, just try a few of them. There's a lot of free of them out there. I just try a few of them and see what you like the best. There might be ones that a lot of other people have liked and told me they like that you wouldn't like, right? So it's kind of about personal preference, but yeah. So Jim M says, when you put, where do you hit the ball, low or high? When you putt? Okay, yeah. So when you putt, where do you hit the ball, low or high? So you're going to hit under the ball just a little bit. So let me grab. All right. So a putter has loft on it. I know it kind of doesn't look like it, but a putter is generally going to have anywhere from 2 to 5 degrees of loft on it. So because of that, you will hit a little bit under the equator of the ball, just slightly under. And you want to do that because the reason why a putter has loft on it is because it needs to lift the ball just a little bit out of the grass. So when the ball is sitting on the green, right, it's actually down in the grass just a little bit. I know that green's really, really short, right, but it's actually going to be sitting down in the green a little bit. So what we need to do is we need to give it a little bit of loft to get it up out of there and get it rolling nicely on the green first. So you're actually going to be, technically, the putter is going to be hitting slightly under the equator of the ball, which is going to lift the ball up out of there. Now, that's not something you really have to try to do. You don't need to try to scoop the club or anything like that to get to do that. Now, if you have a lot of forward shaft lean with your putter, right, and you're hitting down on it like that, then you are going to hit the top, but that's not going to get the ball on a very good roll, right? You want to lift it up out of there just a bit. And if you get fitted for a putter, if you go somewhere like Sam Putt Lab or like Club Champion or somewhere that uses Sam Putt Lab, they analyze that part of it, the loft that you're delivering, and they try to get that exactly where it should be, right? So you can have 5 degrees on your putter, but you may putt with backwards. And I wouldn't necessarily recommend this, but you may putt with backward shaft lean and add too much loft. And you may putt with a 4-degree putter, but maybe you putt with your hands very forward like this, and you deliver negative loft to the ball. Well, you're going to hit you're going to basically chop down into a lot of balls, and especially on longer putts, that ball's going to bounce a lot. It's not going to roll very true. So you want to deliver the putter with just enough loft to lift it up out of the grass, out of the grass on the green, and get it rolling true on the green. So if you get fitted, you'll find that. Now, one thing you can do is if you go out some early morning and there's a lot of dew on the green, you can hit some putts and see if you're adding too much loft or too little loft. So the way that you would know that is, let's say you hit a putt and you see the dew on the green, you see it lifts out initially and then it skips a bunch. Well, that means that you're adding too much loft because you're probably getting a little bit of backspin, right? So it's coming up out of there, it's got a little bit of backspin, and then it bounces and rolls too much. And if you get it to where it's bouncing right away, it doesn't lift up out of there, that means that you have too little loft. What you want is for the ball just to lift up out, so to have no contact, just for depending on how long the putt is, but just initially, and then as soon as it lands, you want it to be very little hopping. You want it to be hopping as little as possible. You want to get it rolling as soon as possible. If you're seeing that, that means that you got a good amount of loft on your putter. That means it's going to be rolling pretty true. But if you see a lot of skips right away or after you first hit it, once you get the ball up in the air and it skips a lot after that, that's an indication that that you probably you're putting too much loft on it. And you don't necessarily have to go get a putter with more or less loft. You can just, if you see you're adding loft, then you can just try to have a little bit more forward shaft length and keep it there. And you can see if you're topping the ball into it, you can get the putter a little bit more vertical and keep it there. And you can kind of change things a little bit that way. All right, so thanks everybody for joining me. It's 4 o'clock, so we'll go ahead and wrap it up right there. We'll be back here tomorrow, Friday, 11 a.m. Eastern time. Everybody have a good rest of your day, and I'll talk to you all next time.